So in this video, I'm going to talk about Thomas Szasz's essay, The Ethics of Addiction. This general argument is coming from a libertarian perspective and basically saying, hey, we have these individual rights, we have these individual freedoms, and the government shouldn't be mandating what we consume. There's a lot of things that the government isn't mandating, so why is there this special attention put to drugs? And he goes back, or he starts out with the World Health Organization's definition of drug addiction. And there are certain terms that are used that seem very hyperbolic and exaggerated, and as if they're making a moral and a prescriptive statement rather than a descriptive statement, which is what they should be doing as a medical community. They should be making a descriptive scientific statement rather than a moral political statement. So they use these terms such as drug addiction being detrimental, there's an overpowering desire, there's a compulsion, and Szasz is basically saying, no, that's not how it is all the time. Not everyone is compelled to take drugs or to try drugs, right? It's really just based off of the kind of that individual situation. And he says that this type of thinking is really problematic because they're painting themselves as being objective and descriptive when they in fact are being prescriptive and infusing morality into something that's technical and scientific, and that can be really dangerous. And he also says that it can lead to a slippery slope argument where, okay, if you say that one thing is dangerous, well then don't we have to mandate everything else that's dangerous? So I could, jump off the building, right? It's very easy for someone to do that, but then do we prevent people from living in buildings? Or I could get into a car accident. Cars are extremely dangerous, but then do we tell people, no, never get in your car? So where do we draw the line with respect to what's dangerous and what we have to mandate, regarding legality with respect to the actions that we engage in? And so he basically says that all drugs should be legalized. It's not for us to make these arbitrary distinctions between some drugs versus other drugs. And like I said, he's coming from like a Milton Friedman libertarian background. There should be a free trade of everything. We have so many other individual liberties in American society, so why is it not like that with drugs? And of course, there's going to be negative personal and social consequences with drugs, but that doesn't mean that there should be legality surrounding it. Though he sees those as two separate issues because there isn't a direct harm that someone is causing all the time by choosing to take drugs. So if I choose to take some sort of illegal drug, I am not necessarily directly harming other people. And I take that responsibility on if I end up doing that. So it shouldn't be up to the government to mandate it. It should be up to ourselves to mandate it. And it's not really the government's business what we consume, right? The government doesn't really mandate what we consume mentally or intellectually. So why is there, or in terms of what we consume with food, right? Some foods are really dangerous for us, but there's no restriction about that. So why do we have that when it comes to drugs? It seems very arbitrary. And some drugs are legal, whereas other drugs aren't. So, alcohol is legal, but we know that's a very potent drug, and it's more potent than some currently illegal drugs like marijuana. And so why is there that kind of arbitrariness? There's inconsistency there when it comes to what's legal versus what's illegal. And he also says people have different reasons for taking drugs, right? We have to understand why people take drugs. Sometimes it's to cope with something, sometimes it's based off of loneliness, sometimes it's to party with people, whatever it is. And so you can't necessarily make a universal rule when people have different reasons for doing something. He also critiques the drug bureaucracy, with the war on drugs that started in the early 1970s. It's costed the nation a lot of money. And he says that it's been a waste of money. There's all these highly paid bureaucrats who aren't doing anything. And a lot, the things haven't really improved. It's just gotten overall perhaps more violent. And people are still finding ways to take drugs even though they're illegal. So he doesn't really see a connection between legality and the improvement of society. He believes that we are autonomous people and that the government shouldn't be mandating what we consume. And he also says that the whole drug war is an example of the church and medicine kind of uniting forces and coming together, where they're acting like they're making these technical, scientific statements about drugs and using that as a justification for censoring drug use and making many drugs illegal. But he says that that's not the case. They're making moral and political claims, and that can be really dangerous because then what happens when it comes to other types of things that we consume? That can lead to some sort of totalitarian state, basically, with that slippery slope reasoning. And don't we have a freedom to self-medicate, right? So he refers to John Stuart Mill's harm principle, which is basically that I can extend my arm as far as it goes until it hits another person. And so until it hits another person, that's when my actions and freedom can be limited. But with drugs, he says it's not really negatively impacting other people directly. And if someone decides to consume drugs, then they are taking that individual responsibility on for what they will do taking those drugs. And it shouldn't be mandated by the government then. So why don't we have the freedom to self-medicate? We should have the freedom to self-medicate. Why is there this arbitrary limit with drugs? So he's basically saying all drugs should be legalized. We are autonomous individuals, and we can take that personal responsibility on for consuming whatever it is that we are consuming, and it shouldn't be up to the government.